menopause is not necessarily being the beginning of the end, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. Nobody is having the conversation about us stepping into our power, about the wisdom, the incredible resilience that we have by this point of our lives, that we can literally navigate any storm. Welcome to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast for midlife women who are ready to rewrite the rules and create their kick-ass next chapter. I'm Jennifer Arthurton, and each episode we dive into reinvention, resilience, and unapologetic pursuit of your best chapter yet. Because midlife is not the beginning of the end, it's simply a new beginning. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Arthurton. And today we're having a conversation about reclaiming our innate erotic nature. And I was just saying to my guest, who I'm going to introduce you to in a second, that for some reason I have this underlying nervousness about this topic. Although, as you know, I love exploring anything that can help us understand ourselves better so that we can create a life that feels really good to us. And so there's something in this topic that's kind of curious for me. And my guest, she is a repeat guest on the show, is Elizabeth DiAlto. She is the CEO and founder of the School of Sacred Embodiment. She is a podcast host, the owner of the untameyourself.com website, and my very, very first coach ever, way back when I first left my corporate job and was struggling in the sea of what's next and how
this was a decade ago. Wasn't it 2014 or 2015?
It was 10 years ago, which I cannot believe.
No.
So welcome, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to have you back on the show. I think we got a lot to unpack here.
I think we do. Do you want to tell them how this came to be?
Yeah, I was literally about to jump into that. So Elizabeth sent a couple of months ago, I think it was, she sent an email out about re-entering her work around helping people discover their erotic nature. And as I was reading through this email, I was having all kinds of feels. I mean, she was talking about, self-worth, self-love, self-trust. And really that's what this conversation is about. I mean, yes, we're talking about, sex could be included in that, but it's so much bigger than that. But as I was reading through her email, I had this overwhelming feeling as women, when we enter our 40s, 50s, and beyond, we do not give ourselves permission to explore that side of ourselves because as a culture, we've been told that we no longer fit the category of sexiness, of being desired. And so we kind of close off that part of ourselves, and really the answer to so many of the questions that we have actually lie in this. And maybe that's why I'm feeling this little sense of nervousness as I explore this for myself. So I really wanted to unpack this conversation with Elizabeth because it goes so much farther than just us feeling sexy. Mm-hmm. It's about reclaiming all of these lost parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would add to that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been laughing about since I think I was 38, I'm 41 now, is truly how the culture just convinces women to be so afraid of 40. Yeah. So afraid of 35 plus even, right?
Yeah.
Not to mention 45, 50, whatever, makes us feel like we need to be using all the anti-aging things, taking all the hormonal supplements, freak out about perimenopause, whether or not your body is even experiencing it. You should start being nervous and just be on it and read everything and be hyper vigilant about all this shit, right? But no one tells you that this is also kind of your sexual prime.
Yeah.
And even if you're not a super sexual person, it could be, the fact, and obviously I am, and again, the erotic is certainly not just about sex, but even in feeling connected to yourself or your sensuality is none of us are too old for that. And in fact, when you engage with it at this age, where if you've been working on yourself in any way, you don't
Yeah.
care about the things you used to care about. You don't have the insecurities you used to have. So what's available and accessible now is like pretty deep and wild and intense and exciting. However far you want to turn that dial or
Yeah.
go down that rabbit hole, there's just so much. And I think that's why the culture talks us out of it, because we could be real scary if we tap into all this.
Into our power. I want to double click on something you just said there because, like this relationship that we have with our bodies, though, like I feel like there's a couple of hurdles that we have to get to before we can like really dive in deep. And this whole notion of like perimenopause and menopause, like when it was all happening to me, first of all, like there was no conversation. I mean, there's a lot more conversation now, but when I first started going through it 10 years ago, there was no conversation about it. And I did not know what was happening to me. And this whole idea that I was going through menopause felt like a little bit of a betrayal by my body. It's like my body's now taken me out of the game. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And so there's a lot of coming to terms with what's happening to us, but a lot of that is around how this time of our lives are positioned. Like we're taught to dread menopause, like it's the beginning of the end. We're shriveling up and blowing away, right? And having to, like, I've now come to see menopause as being the gift I didn't know I needed.
Oh,
But it took me a while to get to that place.
are you hearing all this noise outside?
Yes.
That was a big truck. It's
Oh,
fine.
that's okay. That's all right. But yeah,
So,
so yeah.
no, no, keep going.
No, so I just feel like this idea that we have to come to terms with, like, menopause is not necessarily being the beginning of the end, but rather the beginning of a new chapter.
Yeah. And I'm not in that yet, and it's interesting. When I turned 40 last year, a friend of mine who's later in her 40s was like, "Welcome to perimenopause." And I said, "No." I said, "Why? Why are we espousing all of this and putting it on each other?" Because here's also the thing. I know scientifically our bodies are changing and all this stuff, but perimenopause has been created by like the medical industrial complex, right? Just another thing to sell women's stuff for. And again, the changes are happening and stuff is real. I'm not denying that, but the psychosomatics are also real, right?
Totally.
How
Totally.
how you choose to think about it will, in on a level,
Mhm.
impact your experience of it. Like there's also science to back that up as well, right? So
100%.
I just think it's really fascinating how, if you want to take an empowered approach, you could be like, "Ooh," and just be really curious about like, okay, what's going on with my body? Okay, that doesn't feel great. Okay, I'm having a little trouble sleeping. Okay, what's going on with this? But then also like, what's getting unlocked?
And that's the thing. I did a post a little while ago that's exactly that. Because if you scroll through, like, I don't know, my social media feed is menopause, perimenopause, and every part of that conversation is on pill, supplement,
Yes.
like how, symptom, what's happening in your body. But nobody is having the conversation about us stepping into our power, about the wisdom, that we've collected, the life experience, the resiliency, like the
Mm-hmm.
incredible, and this is like such a missing thing as far as I'm concerned, the incredible resiliency or resilience, I always get this word mixed up, the incredible resilience that we have by this point of our lives, that we can literally navigate any storm, including menopause,
Right.
right? And come out of the other side. Like that's how freaking powerful we are. But it's not talked about in those contexts. It's
Mm-mm.
talked about, how debilitating our symptoms are and how we must fix them immediately and not look our age and, still be everything we were when we were in our 20s.
And I don't know, so being a person who's delightfully child free by choice and has been partner free, I haven't been like a long term, because I'm, me, I'm always living in my questions of stuff. I don't even know if I am a monogamous person or not. But also over the last several years, as I've been getting older and closer to menopause or whatever, and also it was the pandemic and I gained a bunch of weight. Again, the odds are stacked against me for like meeting, supposedly according to cultural standards, like meeting lovers or like whatever. And I have to tell you, honestly, for like the last couple years, I've been having the most like amazing, epic, just connective, exploratory sexual experiences, sensual experiences, spiritual
Mm,
experiences, you know? And sometimes those
mm,
things overlap, but it's because I'm open and interested about the whole interior of my world and how that energy ripples out into the exterior.
mm. Wow. So can you define for us, or like your definition of the erotic or eroticism?
Mm. So rather than define it, I want to tell everyone to just go Google Audre Lorde's essay, Uses of the Erotic
Mm.
as Power. This has
Oh,
been like my primary organizing. Like, I've been into like sensual and erotic everything for over a decade, but actually probably going on closer to 15 years now. But in 2020, when I did my erotic movement arts training with my teacher, Rie, she had us read that essay. And I was already, I don't know how I hadn't found this essay before because I was already all up in all kinds of Audre Lorde stuff. But I love the perspectives on how it's personal, it's political, it's spiritual. So I'm typically going to be coming from like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, but like the political, the social, the socialization aspect of it
mm,
all. So the erotic, if you look at in the Greek language, there's 6 different words to describe love, and eros is one of them. And depending on where you look for the definition, it might just say affectionate love, it might say sensual, it might say sexual. But really, and one of the things Audre Lorde talks about in that essay is how has gotten pornified. Like the word erotic is synonymous now with like pornographic, and that is not it, because the thing that's absent in the pornographic that is abundant in the erotic is feeling. It's feeling,
mm,
it's intimacy, it's depth. It's the full range of emotion. And so, what I think is amazing about this, a context perhaps to add a layer of understanding or inquiry, is, you know, we live in this world of dating apps, right? Where casual dating is such a thing, casual sex is such a thing. And I think that's so funny, as if any sex could be casual. Like
mm.
your bodies are merging, even if you're treating it like a transactional exchange, right? Where you're not trying to like catch feelings or like whatever. It's this incredible. Bell Hooks also has a quote about how men, and that we're speaking heteronormatively, but how a lot of men look to sex to for feeling, for
Mm.
sensation, for intimacy. It's like they don't want to actually be intimate. They don't want to do the whole like relational relationship, but they hope to like get some of that, what they crave through sex alone. And you can't get that through sex alone, you know? You can get like a glimpse or a glimmer. And so, what I think is so amazing about the erotic is it is just so multifaceted. And but the fact that it
Mm.
includes the sensual, the sexual, like the physically intimate is what makes it challenging, scary, intimidating, taboo. Because what's more vulnerable than being naked?
Right. So, by that definition, can you have erotic without the sexual component?
Yes. So you've taken my freaking classes. You know this,
Yeah.
right? You can move your body so sensually, primally, connecting in. I love tying to energetics of like animals. Like, I don't know if people are seeing the video anywhere, but I have this serpent tattoo, right? Like that serpentine, undulate, nonlinear movement, or like embodying like a lioness or a wild cat. Like there's primal energies. There's all these energies that if you can express it in sex, you can express it through movement on your own
Mm.
without sexual turn on, with sensual. Like there is, it's like the erotic, there's this power that you feel when you allow yourself to drop into movement like that, right? Or sometimes we've all felt it just from like a song. Like a song comes on and
Mm.
you're like,
Yes.
damn, that's hot. Like it's just there is turn on available that doesn't have to be sexual, but that can really be so enlivening in a way that is not just not primal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense because I think one of the things that I credit, the time that I worked with you way back when was um, really giving me connection back to my body, which for like a lot of women, I had completely disconnected and I lived from my neck up, other than to try and beat my body into some shape or form. Like that was my only connection with it. But through, the wild soul movement and the things that you were doing at that time, it was starting to like feel my body in a very different way that I didn't know was available to me
Yeah.
before that time, other than, okay, you're between the sheets with somebody, right?
Yeah.
But like that, I like that it was mine. Like it wasn't as a
Yes.
result of the thing, it was actually
Yes.
mine.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, like when you talk about, that through, like you hear a great song and your body just starts to move. Like that happens to all of us where your body's just like literally tapped into something that your
Yes.
brain is not even connected with. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing. And moving in a way, and this is, you kind of talked about this in the email that you sent that just kind of lit off all these sparks for me, was like, moving, we have been taught, and I think especially the women of my generation, that moving in those ways that feel sensual is very forbidden
Yep.
because it's slutty, it's too sexy, it's
Uh-huh.
inviting, it's like all of
Dangerous.
these, it's dangerous, like what will people think? And so, in being the good girls, we've cut off that, but we've also cut off parts of ourselves in the process of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? Which I think is so beautiful about the work that you do, because whether it's conscious or unconscious to us, like every time we ascribe to this notion of how a woman is supposed to be, right? Like we chop off some part of ourselves
Yeah.
to make it be that way. Right. And by the time you reach 50, man, like you've chopped off a lot of parts.
That's right. You know what I've always found so interesting? Because how old are you now?
I am 58.
You're 58, right? So you are 17 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And back when we were working together, I mean, at that time when I was in my early 30s, I had many clients who were significantly older than me. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why? I just thought it was fascinating that anyone that much older than me would want to work with me. But what I realized is because the work revolved around untaming yourself, there's just like, no, that's timeless, right?
Yeah.
At any
Yeah.
point in a woman's adult life, she might bump into something that says, hey, time to start bringing all the parts of you back online,
Yeah.
right? You've cut these things off. You've denied these things. You like put this on a shelf. You've been pretending it's not there, but something will happen. And it might not be an isolated incident. It could be things building up
Mm-hmm.
over time or whatever it is. Or maybe you meet people or you see someone or you're inspired or whatever it is, or you're so tired and drained and like bored and feeling like blah. And then
Yeah.
something like, again, it could be a song, it could be a passage in a book, it could be a poem. And you're like, oh, there's something
Right.
stirring under the surface that I must touch and see what wants
Yeah.
to happen. And I realized that that's what I'm always doing, and that's why our range. I always have women from like their 20s up to their 70s
Yeah.
because it's never too soon and it's never too late.
And I think that's the thing. Like when I first came across your work, and I don't even know how I found you. Like I still consider this like a gift from the universe. That's
Oh,
whatever it was, I came across you. But there was something about your work that like was speaking to me on a really deep level, even though I didn't even fully understand what it meant at the time.
yeah,
But I think if you, like me, grew up in the corporate world, we're very much like, the box that you're put in is like very, very narrow,
it's
right? Like
literally buttoned up.
it's literally buttoned up and you have to chop off a lot of emotion, a lot of
Yeah,
feelings, a lot of stuff. And so this is where I find that menopause was the gift that I didn't know that I needed, because when my body started transitioning and all the upheaval of hormones, that like first of all, my tolerance for being kept in the box was like, I just don't have the time or patience for it anymore. Like that
yes,
got cut off.
yeah,
Right. And then it was like my body is now craving things. It's telling me things, right,
mm-hmm.
that I have to honor in a different way. Like it's no longer an option for me to stay in this box, to stay small, to stay disconnected.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like, that's why I always call like menopause the pattern interrupt, or like shaking the foundation, because
Yeah.
especially for like as women are coming into their 50s, they're like there's some stuff missing here. I don't even know what it is, but I know need to start digging into it. And that's probably why you had, that influx of, of older women.
And well, what's also interesting is like menopause can be physically uncomfortable in a variety of ways. And I think what also happens is women get used to just metabolizing and accepting discomfort.
Right.
Not
Exactly.
like in the relationships, in work settings, people speaking over you, like you just get used to, and you're like, that's just the way it is. But then you reach a point where it's like, I'm done. Like
Yeah.
it can be so physically uncomfortable. You're like, something has got to change. And then once you open one of those doors, the other doors are like, hi, me too.
Yeah.
Please
They're
also
all
me.
open.
I don't want to be uncomfortable. Your mind is like, I don't want to be uncomfortable anymore either. Emotions are like, can you please feel me so I can be out of this
So I
system
can move on.
already?
It's
Yeah.
true. It's so true. But that connection with my body that I have now, like through your work, that I have now developed, like is the greatest gift. Like
Mm,
honestly, the greatest gift of my life, because now I'm in a place where like my body will react to things before my mind even has caught up with what's going on,
totally.
and it's the cue for me. Whereas before, when I had no connection, like I would have tolerated that for so long until my brain is like, wait a minute, there's something
Yeah.
happening, and it goes through its right. Now I'm like, it's instant, and I'm like, I pay attention right off the bat.
Yes. You save so much
Right.
time, don't you?
Oh, so much time and so much grief, man. Like you could just cut to the
Oh,
chase that
God.
much faster, right?
Time,
Because
grief, money, like all the
yeah.
things. I mean, again, especially, and I know you've talked about this, that this demographic, right? Let's call it middle aged women,
Mm-hmm.
which could be anywhere from 40s to 60s at this point,
Yeah.
depending on what you consider it.
Yeah.
A
Exactly.
lot of these women have disposable income, like they're highly marketable too,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
or
they're an attractive
market
market for
toable. You know what I
sure.
mean? And so I think, again, that's why we've seen perimenopause has become such a thing, because if you can get women freaking out about it, you can get them paying for stuff about it, right? It's
100%.
like there's
Yeah, it's been
also
commercialized.
the discernment that comes, like you're talking about, when you are actually connected to your body and you can feel what it's saying to you, like when it's saying it. Also, I tell
Yeah.
people, you want to save a lot of money? Connect to your body,
Yeah.
because
And a
we're
lot of
often
time.
buying things to feel better when all we have to do is kind of like chill out, move a little bit, take a couple breaths, maybe have a snack, drink some water, see how we feel, and then maybe make some choices, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I always say this too. Like life is freaking short. So anytime I can skip a couple steps and get to where I need to go faster, I'm like, okay, I'm there. Talk to me a little bit about the connection with the erotic and self-worth, self-trust.
When you have denied whole parts of yourself your whole life because you were told, taught, or just picked up in the culture and communities and messaging around you that it's dangerous or scary or shameful,
Shameful. Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
don't value it, or you're taught to fear it. So again, you're like kind of moving around fractured or
Mm,
disjointed, disembodied. Um, and who can really root and ground into the fullness when you've got these parts that you're trying to like
right.
act like aren't there, or suppress or repress or whatever? This is literally why some people are depressed,
Right.
because you don't even know your whole self. You only know the parts that you've deemed acceptable. So it's really just a matter of internalization of messaging. It's not true, but you've
Mm,
like eaten it up, digested it, and metabolized it. Right.
right.
And so also, if these impulses, doesn't mean those parts of you are not speaking to you. So these impulses are coming, and you're ignoring and you're not listening. And so think about it this way. I'm sure a lot of people listening have kids, or at least have nieces and nephews, or have engaged with children. Imagine there was a child in your life who was like trying to get your attention and you just kept being like, no, 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 like
Mm,
not right
mm,
now. No, no.
yeah.
How might that, how would the child feel? You
Hmm.
wouldn't do that. Right. But we do this to parts of ourselves. And then we're like, oh, why don't I feel worthy? Why don't I
Right.
trust myself? Because whole entire aspects of who you are like trying to get your attention and communicate with you. And you're like, no, 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 go away. I don't see you. I can't see you.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. And it's interesting because like I've been in this work for a while now, right? Like I said, 10 years ago when I hired you as my first coach, right? I've been in this work for a while now. And they're like undoing that programming, like that cultural programming, the societal narrative around a woman, being her full self and, fully expressed in all the ways. I still struggle with that, right? Like, even though on a conscious level, I'm like, yeah, I get it. You know what I mean? And full expression is where it's at. The parts of that programming are so deep that I'm like pulling out the roots of it still, like to this day, like just
Mhm.
constantly, and going back and repairing holes and doing all the things because I mean, it's literally served up to us every day in every way.
Yeah.
Right. And it takes a level of consciousness to be able to say, I reject that. Like, I see what you're
Yeah.
doing and I reject that. But for so many of us, and I'm including myself in this, it's just becomes like, like you said, we're just accepting it and digesting it. Right. And being able to stand in a place where you're like, where your foundation is strong, I guess, where your level of self love, of self trust is like solidly rooted. There's a place that maybe you can be like, okay, I'm standing here now and I can see what that is and I can actively reject it. But for most of us, it's just such an integrated part of the world that we live in. It can be really hard to even spot.
Well, because we take it so personally, right?
Hmm.
Rather
Right.
than this is why it's so important. This is why I love that Audre Lorde essay, because she really points out how the programming, how the conditioning, how the socialization
Right.
works, right? So then you could see the threads to pull to unravel it, right? Because people love
Right.
to use the word dismantling. You got to dismantle like the oppressor within, which is another, again, Audre Lorde all day long and bell hooks. These are like the voices in my brain when I think about these things. Um, because that's where the power comes from. The power comes from being like, no, like that was fed to me. And then you
Hmm.
get to question it. And here's the thing, too, you get to question it and be like, well, what is there truth anywhere in this for me? Because some people are just more conservative, right? Some people are not so sexually inclined or progressive or expressive or sensually, and that's who they really are. Like I
Hmm.
have a new podcast that I'm running with my friend Alicia, and we joke like I'm like the promiscuous one. She's much more like low key dialed down when it comes in the realm of all of these types of erotic things, right? And that's who she is. But she knows that's who she is because she's done the inquiry.
Right.
So to be like,
Right.
what's the spectrum here? And where do I fall on it? Right? And maybe where do I fall on it in this season of my life or this cycle of my life? But a lot of women have really untapped, really unexamined erotic power, right? And for
Mm.
some people, it's like the key to a lot of truth that they
Mm.
have not allowed themselves or thought it was okay to even
Right.
explore.
I love that you just the way you just expressed it as on a spectrum, like our expression of it on a spectrum, right? Because I think there's a big difference between the acknowledgement of it and the expression of it. Because in my mind, like they were kind of connected. If I'm acknowledging it, therefore I'm expressing it. But I can be acknowledging it, but my expression of it can be much on the lower side versus like on the. But like I get to choose that, right? Like
Yeah.
that gets to be but like to me there was this connection of as soon as you discover your erotic self, you then become this, like, you know what I
No.
mean?
Well, and I think that's why a lot of people won't go there, because they see on Instagram, on social media, in porn or whatever, it's like they think that this is like the standard. This is, if I unlock this, this is what I'm gonna be. It's like,
Yeah.
no. And
Yeah.
also, you also get to be in choice around who and where and how you even express that. It
Right.
doesn't then, it's interesting, I think, because we live in this social media driven age that's also so performative. How, people say, well, if it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen. It's like, let me tell you how much of my life doesn't happen on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, and you've known me for a long time. I used to share a lot more. I share a fraction now. And it's not because I'm hiding, it's just because I love having a life that's for
Mm.
me. I love
Yeah.
being in my life and not having this thought running in the back of my mind. Should I be taking a picture of this? Should I share this? Diluting all of my experiences, wondering if I should be sharing them on the internet. Like, no. Right? So part of
Yeah.
it is also engage to your level of comfort and capacity and desire, but also it does not have to be for anyone but you. And then
Yeah.
once you get comfortable with shit, then decide who gets the honor of receiving that expression from you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So that we can like claim it as our own before any kind of, and then decide how we want to express that. Like, I love that because it feels so much more accessible that way. Because it's
Mhm.
like, if I'm here, like from here to that big expression of it feels like, oh my God, right? But
Yeah.
like, I can just like be here and be doing the work and doing that exploration without it needing to be anything.
A 1,000%. So when I was promoting that experience, Untame Your Erotic Body, that I sent that email out that you had responded to, I
Yeah.
did make a video, a movement video, and I posted it on Instagram. And it was actually Steph, your daughter, commented on it. And she was like, wow, I didn't realize how much I needed to see a woman enjoying being in her body.
Mm, yeah.
That alone, and I've used this phrase for years, enjoying the pleasure of your own existence.
Mm,
That could be a goal.
yeah,
It doesn't have
it
to, it
should
could
be.
be a moment that happens in your room by yourself. It could be when you're putting your lotion on after the shower or washing your face. Like, eh, there's so much, there's so many places and spaces where this like sensual connection to life itself, to your own self, whether that's again sexual or not, it's aliveness
Yeah.
and it's
So
felt.
yeah, and it's felt, and this is something that I have been doing for myself in the last little while, is like just being very conscious about, like, in the shower as I'm washing myself or as I'm putting lotion on, like to just be in that moment. Like,
Yeah.
it's a small fraction of my day, but just being in that moment and being connected to my body, because you're running a business, you have a big life, you're just go 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 go, do 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 do, and if I can claim that time in that bathroom with the door closed to
Yes.
spend 5 minutes putting lotion on my body and loving on her, I'm like, oh, this feels really good to me, right? And just
Yes.
bringing back that connection, so it can be literally as simple as that. Or
Yeah.
buying a special, this is the other thing, like I would use like whatever was available to put on my body. Now I make a conscious choice to go out and buy something that I think is going to feel really good on my body, right?
Yeah.
Like a certain scent or a certain,
Yeah.
like, cream or an oil or whatever, right? Like, it's a conscious decision
Yeah.
to be, in that moment with that particular activity, with that particular lotion or whatever it is.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
listen, my inclination is deeply spiritual, and I know that's not everyone's way, but I'm going to say this anyway. One of the things I love, I had a friend like about a month ago ask me this question, what I love so much. I'm in Brooklyn, we were walking in Prospect Park, and he said, can you tell me how you experience God? And I'm
Oh.
like, how much time you got? But one of the things I said, which I love, and this is not an original perspective, this is how a lot of people see things. Each one of us is like God, goddess, the universe, like whatever you call that, experiencing itself, right? So like I am the
Mm,
goddess having an Elizabeth DiAlto experience. You are the
Right.
goddess having the Jennifer Arthurton experience, right? And so if you are spiritually inclined and if you want to honor your creator, it's like, why would I not want to experience the full capacity of the pleasure and the delight of being in a body, regardless of other things that might not be pleasurable or delightful, right? Because I think that's it
Mhm.
too. Some people think I
Yeah.
have a chronic illness or I have a disability or I'm old or I'm tired or I'm not conventionally attractive. So those things aren't for me. These things are for every single body.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
however your body is, these things you could feel, because this is about feeling, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how it looks. It doesn't matter if anyone else would find it attractive. This is for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and I love that you just mentioned that, because one of the reasons that I started, after years of hating on my body, like, and trying to beat it into some shape or form, and realizing the fractured relationship that I had with her, this little ritual that I created about, having a shower and putting on lotion was literally to remind myself of the freaking miracle, like the
Miracle.
divine perfection
Yep.
that is this body, regardless of what I think about it. Like, my opinion actually doesn't even matter, although it
Correct.
does, right? It does, but it doesn't, right? But
Yeah.
like, just to remind myself that, like, my every day my heart beats, every day I breathe, every day
Yes.
there's thousands of processes that are allowing me to move through this world with ease. And I, like, at the very least, I need to honor that. Like, I go out and I marvel at nature. Why am I not marveling at this
Hello.
iteration of nature?
Yes. Yes. 1,000% that.
Yeah, yeah, so amazing. So, how is it that you really help women tap into that erotic side of themselves? Because, okay, there's somebody who's coming from, let's say, the corporate world or some kind of traditional background. They're in their 50s, like, they're feeling disconnected. They're listless, like they just know that something's missing. Like, where do you start in terms of doing that work to explore and reclaim that part of yourself?
For me, it's always movement.
Hmm.
Right? So these erotic body classes that I teach, and it's cool. The time that we're having this conversation, you reached out when I was just promoting it, but now I'm actually it was a 30-day thing, and now we're on day like 27, I think. And the way I designed the experience, the Untamed Your Erotic Body experience, was I gave 3 movement classes with 3 themes: desire, delight, and discernment.
Mm,
3 things that I call the erotic drivers. So, like,
right.
if you're wanting to connect with your erotic nature, your erotic power, desire, delight, discernment. And I also recorded a workshop about those 3 drivers, just like an intro, right? Because like any healing or growth or transformation process has to start with awareness. You're not getting anywhere if you don't know what you don't know, right? So just giving people these themes, these pillars to anchor into: desire, delight, discernment.
Right.
Discernment is so important because these energies can be a little wild and they could be a little unsettling, right? So to also be anchoring and rooting into your discernment, like what is and isn't for you, as you try on an experiment and you stretch into your expression or maybe contract when you're like, oh, that was a little too much for me. And it's kind of this divine dance to get to what is genuine and authentic for you. So for me, it always starts with movement, because movement resensitizes us. Many of us have been so
Mm, yeah.
desensitized and disconnected, like you said, from your body. Now you can tap in and not even need to be. It's on and you
Yeah.
are listening. You're in a 2-way conversation. So that's what it's for. I start with the movement. And God, one of the most beautiful things somebody shared, a woman in her 50s actually, after she did the first class, she was like, oh my God, I've been missing a part of myself. And like, I've known, but I couldn't even articulate what I was missing until it came back online during this class, And she's like, and I sobbed and sobbed because I was there. I was there all along. And I realized, right? So
Mm,
again, nothing, we could talk about stuff all day, theorize, philosophize, whatever. We could read all the essays. But when you have that felt experience, when you touch your own power, even for a moment, you're like, oh, that's me. And that's
Yeah.
real. So I always start with movement.
Yeah. I love that because movement really is about, it takes our conscious brain offline,
Yep.
right? Because we all live so much in our heads, right? Like it takes our conscious brain offline for a second so that our body can actually like take the lead for a second,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden your body's like you're moving to the music or whatever it is. And I think in that place, because our conscious mind, we've spent so much time with our conscious mind ruling our body that all of a sudden the body does something or feels something and then you're like, ooh, right? Like this is new. And like being able to connect with different dimensions, like I say all the time, we were never meant to be the same person from the beginning to the end of our lives. And
No.
the more dimensions that we can explore and open up, like the more well-rounded we will live, the more fulfilled and satisfied we will be with our
Totally.
lives,
Yeah.
right? So being able to tap into movement as a way, and even so, this is the other thing, I feel like sometimes the movement in itself can feel scary,
Yes.
in that like I've never moved my hips this way before, or I've
Mhm.
never, you know. And I want to say to everybody listening, it doesn't need to be a big thing.
No.
Like if it's the smallest of movements, it's a place to start. Like, do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yep. And also, I mean, and you also know this, I've been certifying teachers in the movement
Mm-hmm.
methods for years now. And one of the things I'm obsessed with is like inclusive cueing. So, like knowing and being aware of kind of like the full spectrum of experiences that people might be having and speaking
Mm,
to it, like mentioning, like, it's all right if you feel a little uncomfortable, or if this is a stretch, like take it at your own pace, like do this in your own way. And just like constantly giving people permission to be checking in with themselves to go, what's my version of this today? And even
mm,
that, right? Because so many people are used to being in classes where the goal is to kind of look like everybody else or the instructor or the best person in the room. Best usually defined by some society acceptable like attractiveness or shape or size, right? And some level of like
mm,
fitness, agility, strength, or flexibility, instead of being like, how can your body do a hip circle today? Seated or standing, laying down, like whatever. How can you tap into something that just freaking feels good in your hips? That's it.
yeah.
And then it's your own map. Like that's what I love. It's like when I was first developing Wild Soul Movement back in 2014, a friend had recommended a book by a woman named Gabrielle Roth called Maps to Ecstasy. And I had read that book like twice, and I loved the idea of using the body as like a map, right?
Mm,
To mapping, how do I actually feel? Mapping what's real for me, because my body is like telling me things in different places and areas, and I'm feeling this in one area, this in another, and just tracking that and giving it
mm,
attention. Because how many of us are waiting for somebody else to give us the love, attention, and affection we crave? And not realizing that we can actually give some of that to ourselves. Might not be the same, but my goodness, what it does to make us more magnetic, receptive, ripe.
yeah.
I mean, able to even feel and enjoy when it does come from somewhere else, if that's what you want.
Yeah, I love that because even the people who are strong and agile and flexible, again, you know, if you're like me and you're a gym goer, right? Everything is very linear,
So
right?
linear.
And you know, I as you're talking, I'm thinking of straight lines and squiggly lines and how good it sometimes feels to just be squiggly,
Yeah.
right? And just like how you can unlock different things in your body, you know, through the squiggly lines. And it's something that I have to incorporate. It, like I fall in and out of it all the time, but it's something that needs to become a regular practice because every time I do it, I'm just like, oh, yes,
So
like I
good.
needed it. I needed it. And it needs to become a regular thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. So what's on the other side of a woman being fully embodied in her erotic nature?
Well, first of all, I
What does
want to
that look
say you
like?
don't have to be fully embodied in your erotic nature. In fact, it's only ever like fleeting moments when we're fully in anything.
Mm,
Okay.
mm, thank you
So
for that. Yes.
I don't love the word optimally, but let's just say sufficiently.
Mm.
right?
Okay.
For whatever day, time, or moment of your life. What's on the other side of that is, to also use the word full, having a deeper connection to the fuller expression of who you actually are.
Right.
Like,
That's
people
the name of the
use
game.
these
Yeah.
words. I mean, the word authentic really gets overused, but it still matters. Genuine, like
Yeah.
who you are genuinely, like holistically, completely,
Mm.
right? I love, I love the idea of wholeness, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like,
Yes.
oh God, there's so much to me. Like, I don't know who said it, whose quote is it, that we contain multitudes?
Mm.
This is one of our multitudes, you know?
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
so much locked up in it. So there's just a lot of truth. There's a lot of wisdom.
Truth. Oh.
And of course, there's going to be so much healing, right?
Mm.
Shame, physical trauma. A lot of people have trauma around their bodies or sex.
Mm.
And also, many of us, even if you don't have your own sexual trauma in this lifetime, like I don't, you got two sides of women lineage, right?
Right.
You got mothers and grandmothers, right?
Yeah.
You're even your paternal line, there's mothers there. Like all these women in the line, we are all carrying some of their stuff too. So it's also just real liberating.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think were the first one I ever heard say that, the answer to everything you need is already inside you. Right? Like this is the way that you unlock it. Because
Yeah.
all of those women who feel like, I'm stuck, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do next, like unlocking those parts of yourselves and your true authentic nature will give you the answers to those questions.
Yeah.
Right? But when we're squeezed into the box, we're so contracted that of course we can't figure that out. But like expanding, moving, exploring all the parts of us give us the answers to all of these things. Every question we have,
Truth and
the
wisdom.
answer.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even sometimes the answer is, hey, you don't get an answer to that right now.
Right. And that's okay.
In which case you get to be like, cool, the answer is let me chill. Let me release my grip on this, continue moving through my life, focus on other things, and trust that when it's time, I will know what I need to know.
Yeah.
So it also brings the ability, if it's bringing truth and wisdom, it's opening a door for you to trust yourself more and listen to yourself, right? Develop that inner authority instead of putting the authority outside of yourself.
Which we have been taught to do from the minute our feet hit this planet.
It gets so old. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Give us something
Yeah.
else to do. This is not
Inner
exciting.
authority. I
Yeah.
love that. And on that note, then, what a perfect way to end this conversation. Where can women find more about their work if they're curious now about, exploring this part of themselves? What is the best way for them to find your work?
The website, untameyourself.com. And I don't know when this is coming out, but we're doing a little rebrand. The website's still going to be untameyourself.com, and the School of Sacred Embodiment still exists, but there's also a new body of work called Medicina Erotica, and the whole house. I'm just calling it the House of E, right? For Elizabeth, embodiment, erotic. It's just the house of. We're expanding into the House of E. But if you go to untameyourself.com, just the general website, it's under construction, but if you go to untameyourself.com/links, you'll always see links to whatever we got going on coming up, the old podcast, the new podcast, and this offering that I mentioned, Untame Your Erotic Body. It was a live experience, but it's also just generally available. Anyone can join and still do all the stuff.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you for this conversation. Always a delight, always informative, enlightening. We could talk about this for a couple hours.
But have fun. I hope people can have fun with it and allow themselves to meet it wherever they are and not feel any pressure to dive in anywhere or any way that it's just not genuine to them at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. Start where you are.
Yeah.
Thank you for this conversation. I hope to those of you listening that, there was something that I said or Elizabeth said that kind of just tweaked, and that you feel like you have the permission to now just go explore it a little bit, get curious about it, and maybe, just move your body in a different way today. Like just try something, see what comes up for you. Thanks for listening to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. If you like what you heard, the greatest compliment you could give us would be to comment below and subscribe. Or better yet, you could share this episode with a friend, a relative, or somebody you think could get something out of it. And remember, midlife is not the beginning of the end. It's simply the beginning of your kick-ass next chapter.